Hey everyone, welcome back to Motivation and That. Somehow today is already episode 10, and I do have a couple of episodes that I need to edit and get released, but I also don't want to rush in pulling them together because they're good ones. We're going to talk about jumping into starting your own business and the mental health struggles that might come with that. And we're also going to talk about what it means to quote unquote leave a group chat and those transitions that we might go through in a professional side of life. And it sets us up for a really great future conversation on a personal side of what happens when your friend dynamic changes or dynamics between relationships, things of that nature. So those are slated to come up here in the next couple of weeks. But if you're listening to this, it means I'm in Mexico, hopefully sitting on a beach with nothing else but a book in hand. And because of that, today's just going to be a short reflection back on those first 9 episodes that we had. I've learned a lot about podcasting. I have a lot of great ideas for going forward. At least I hope they're great ideas. And I want to give you a little bit of a teaser on what else is yet to come. Because if you can imagine, we actually have, and I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 episodes that are already scheduled, another 9 that are pending. So the whole rest of the year is pretty much set up. I just got to get my kind of structure and life in order. You also may realize that we have launched Messy Mondays. And when I say we, I mean me. And every Monday, usually by the end of the day, a quick 1 to 2 minute video hits LinkedIn, it hits YouTube, it hits Instagram. And so if you don't follow me on any of those places, I'm going to make sure in the description of this episode to have the links of where you can find me. They are just little quick reflections back on the past week and what it means for the week going forward. And it includes all of the weird messiness that we tend to just be like, oh, I just wish I could leave that behind or close it out. But in reality, it's kind of setting us up for what the tone of things are going to be going forward. So taking that into consideration, we've done about 3 of them and there's more to come. The next one will come actually from Mexico because I'm sure, having not traveled in a few months, there'll be a little bit of messiness for me to navigate through as I sit and reflect on things. So let's take a second and let's look back at the first 9 episodes that have been done on motivation and that. We started out with my husband, Josh, sitting down to talk about the entire uncertainty of what is happening with my career. The fact that I took deferred resignation from the federal government. I was looking about 3 months of quote unquote severance time off, ability to kind of rethink what I was going to do and where I was going to go. Well, 2.5 months of that has already passed almost. I have applied to hundreds of jobs. I haven't gotten one callback. And I'm hearing it's very much the same for a lot of people in that mid to upper management that are kind of 40 and under are running into the same experience. So maybe not where I anticipated being. I certainly didn't expect the podcast to be monetized. I didn't anticipate that everything was just going to fall into place. However, I thought there might be one small thing that would be coming to fruition, and it still may happen, but nonetheless, there's been a lot of pressure, and that pressure includes financial pressure. And if anyone's in a relationship or you're a millennial or you're looking at retirement, financial pressure is tough. And Josh and I have gone back and forth a lot on what does this mean? What are we going to do? What other options are we going to have? So with that being said, he's definitely going to be one of those folks coming back. We're going to do some look back on the last few months. What went well? What could we have done better? And honestly, again, I couldn't have a better partner during this whole process. But I'm not going to lie, it hasn't been easy. I then mixed in a couple of solo episodes, one about when I was growing up and what safety meant and what forgiveness meant and all of those components in the episode, Can I Have a Hug? It was actually one of the top episodes from the first 9, and I think it really resonated with some folks who were starting to pull back the curtain from childhood trauma. Now, is everyone ready to do that? Certainly not. But I will say, after that one and the other episode, Drama, Trauma, and a Dash of Insight, I found myself back in therapy. And that's okay. It means that I realized I still needed a little help to go through things. So I never really left therapy, but I definitely backed off of things. And now I'm going back in person. It is 100% what I needed. And I think it's really going to help me be more insightful as I host these conversations and discussions going forward. We had Jordan come on the Family, Faith, and Fear episode. And let me tell you, maybe it's just the algorithm, but the amount of news articles that I have seen since then on individuals kind of cutting off their parents and what it means and how scary it can be. But the increase in the number that are doing that has been incredible. And I think it creates the safe space for people who are really battling that. I'm one of them. I'm an only child. My mom is in the area. I'm the only family member in the area, and she's not 100% stable still. And there are days when I just want to be like, I'm done. Like, take me off all of the wills, take me off the bank accounts, get out of my house, all of those components, because she lives in one of the homes that I have. And it's not that easy. She's not going to just leave. And if something happens, I'm still next of kin. And it's really difficult. And that's one of the things I ended up going back to therapy on, because as I read more and more and I see people going, instead of asking kids, well, you should be there for your parents. They raised you. They did all of this for you. No, the question for the parents is, why are your children not willing to put up with anything anymore? Why are they walking away? There's a great Instagram just kind of reel that talked about this. And if I find it, I will link it. But I watched it so many times and it was just about a minute long. But it was all of these things of how do we reframe the conversation? What went wrong that so many of us are like, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to be the sandwich generation again. And I think it's really important. So if you're struggling with that, I ask you, go back, listen to that episode. I think Jordan and I got into a lot of great things. It started a trend that I saw through the rest of the sessions that I had and people that came on where we talked about some of the same topics. A lot of things regarding shame came up, practices of gratitude to kind of combat shame came up, respect, taking time for self, and just being really reflective. So after talking to Jordan, after another solo episode, I had Vince on the podcast, a friend of mine from the area, but a friend of Josh's, my husband, who has grown up in the little town in Pennsylvania that we live in, and talking about kind of what the culture shift has looked like. So living somewhere where there's this dynamic of a university, which has a very strong, I will say, blue presence in a lot of ways, combated with a population that is very conservative. We'll just say that. And it clashes a lot. But in the same sense, is there a way to really improve the conversations that we have? I today called my representative, who may or may not be the same registered party that I am. And I'm one of the people that also is completely cool with crossing party lines because I want to vote for a specific thing, not a person, not a color of party or anything like that. And while I didn't really feel heard, I will say that our local representatives here in Pennsylvania and here in our town have been an incredible help to Josh and I when navigating a couple of things. And if there's one thing that you heard in that episode that I want to drive home again, it's pay attention to your local races. I know we may feel like our vote doesn't count when it comes to things like the presidency or even state senators or U.S. senators, but when it comes to who's going to represent your small county or your area and your state legislator, that's important. Even your borough representatives or township representatives or city representatives, go out and make your voice heard because those people have a lot more influence than you might think. I then welcomed Amjad onto the podcast, and I'm going to tell you, he is going to be a recurring guest. The conversation just really flowed with him. It helped me understand what I wanted to see out of this podcast going forward, and it helped me understand even how I wanted to show and display myself consistently from a branding, marketing standpoint, anything like that. And we came on and we talked about the Thankful Edition and life hacks and what gratitude kind of meant, and not the fact that it is the fancy gratitude journal or the app that you dial into every day. It is some of the very most simple things of just maybe talking to yourself or reframing what you're trying to think or hearing a message a little bit differently. We also touched on some very sensitive mental health topics, but again, that's something that's going to be a thread. We probably say all the time that we don't talk enough about that. In reality, there's a lot of conversations about mental health happening, but are they the right ones? And this, again, is not meant to be therapy for anyone in any way, but it should be a place where you can hear something that might resonate with what you struggle with and hear from people that have also gone through those processes or those battles and how that they are kind of digesting it and trying to take the power back. And taking power back is probably the strongest thread through everything. Whether it's power back in your career, whether it's power back in your personal life, whether it's just your timing, your schedule, what you're going to wear, what you're going to eat. There are so many things that we have handed our power over to other people about. And I think we're starting to bring that back. And it's why I was so thrilled to have Kara Robinson Chamberlain on the call. She is a survivor advocate, and she came on. We talked for a solid hour all about kind of respect and honestly had some morbid humor that came up based on Kara's experiences that she's been through, but also taking into consideration that we are more than just a single tag that might be on us based on an experience. So I often joke, I'm part of the Dead Dads Club and the Mental Moms Society. However, I'm so much more than that. Those things may have defined me. They may have helped create who I am today in some form or fashion. And to be quite honest, if I could go back and change it, I wouldn't, because I'm kind of excited to see who I'm going to be going forward. And that would change everything. Now, Kara came on, talked about a lot of the same things. She also has some amazing stuff coming forward. I'm not allowed to share it yet, but I hope that you go out and you give her a follow on TikTok, on Instagram, because she is one heck of an advocate. She is bright. She is smart. She comes to the table with her ducks in a row. She's an awesome mom, and she tells it like it is. And I think that's really important. And bringing focus back to who are we as humans and how important that really is. And then the most recent episode was a little bit of a shift. My mentor that I had back in 2011, one of the very first ones in healthcare that I ever met with, Craig Saylor, came on, and we talked about what it means to retire, but actually it's what it means to change anything in your life that's pretty drastic. So a whole career change, or, moving or doing anything kind of upheaval wise, and what he learned from that. And the fact that he called out that, yes, it is scary, that he went through his scariest 6 months after he did officially retire. But all of it really shows a lot of light and illumination. And I have to admit, when he opened up the podcast and he said that when he and I met for that time in 2011 out in Chicago during a conference, and I was this green student going for my master's degree, and I thought I was cool reaching out to all these folks. And I was intimidated, but I asked him a lot of questions. And when he came on that podcast and he said, "You helped me kind of see what I did and why it was important," I was kind of surprised. But it sets up this great discussion that's going to happen in the later half of this calendar year with two of my mentees that I've had over the last 10 years about the power of what that means. Because mentorship is not all about a mentor to a mentee. A mentee can actually reframe and support a mentor in more ways than they may ever think. Whether they are a student who's in undergrad or high school even, or they are someone who's kind of mid-career, they're navigating things, and they have peer mentorships. So let's talk a little bit about what you can expect as we go forward in the podcast in the next episodes. I'm going to just touch on a few of the folks coming on and wet your whistle a little for the conversations that'll be had. I'm going to be joined by my good friend Ada, who has a company called Find Your Happy. And I think it's really important to have her on to chat about what is happiness? It's a really hard topic. I think we've gone through it and touched on it in a few of the other episodes, but she just has this calming approach to it. And she also is someone who took the leap starting her own company and is balancing motherhood. So I think it's going to be great to have her here. Amjad's going to come back. We're going to talk about shame. We're going to talk about guilt. We're going to talk about all of those ugly feelings that kind of sit inside us and often isolate us from those around us. It was funny, after we recorded the episode, a couple days later, I talked to Amjad and I was like, all right, I think I'm ready. I've got, the clips, I've got the episode. And he was like, I don't remember what we talked about. It was such this kind of emotional shift of things. And we both had a moment where I knew, because I had re-listened to the episode, but it was kind of like, did I say things right? And the piece that I took out of that is there is no right when it comes to this podcast. This podcast is all about in the moment, following the thread of the conversation and really getting to the heart of what just comes up for us. Because what's coming up for us are kind of those messy things. And if we talk about them and we engage in them and we bounce off each other for them, it helps us put a little bit of perspective to it. Bridge, who is going to be one of the very recent or one of the next episodes coming up, where we talk about going into her business journey for herself, is also going to come back and talk about loss. She and I have both lost a parent under some really difficult situations, and it's probably going to be one of the tougher episodes for me, but there's no one else I would rather do it with than Bridget. And it also will touch on self-harm and mental health. So do be warned, trigger warning there. However, if you've been there, if you've been around it, I think it's going to help create a sense of community for something that is really hard often for especially teenagers and young adults to talk about. As I mentioned, I'm going to have two of my mentees come on the pod. Carmelo Montalvo and Mia Spadafora are going to come on, and Carmelo is just this awesome innovator in Pittsburgh. I can't tell you enough. He's a 30 under 30 recipient in the past. And I often joked right after I met him, I'm like, I'm not the mentor here. He is. And we've created a really wonderful peer mentorship relationship over the years where we can go a year or two not hear from each other and then sit down, and it is just like this magic spark of creativity and thought and encouragement. And I'm thrilled to have him on to talk about some amazing things that are happening. I'm going to have Mia. Mia is actually from the town that I live in now, and she is this just rock star of a young leader, took a leap, moved across the country to really get her career going after grad school. And I learned so much from her because she was so willing to be honest with me and to ask me the questions that probably felt a little stupid. And I will never forget, spoiler, when we went on our very first kind of dinner to get to know each other a little bit, and she said, I think I overshared in my interview for my residency. And she told me what she said, and I said, no, you probably are the most memorable person from that residency. And it's a fine balance between how much you share when you're doing professional job interviews, but I could tell that anyone who knew anything when they walked out of that would have realized how mission driven she was. She stayed in the industry even though she's in a new organization, and I can't wait to hear from her about what's been going on. Then one of my dearest, oldest professional friends, Ali Audrey, is going to join. Ali still works in the professional space in a virtual role, just kicking butt from a data, artificial intelligence analysis area. And she also has a little farm, has a horse, has farm animals. And I love that she has found a way to balance those two. However, we both came into the healthcare industry when we were in our early 20s, and we experienced some wild things trying to make our way up through the ranks. Her on a financial side, me on kind of the compliance business operations side. And so we're going to get into that. And a lot of it is going to surround the idea of how do you reinvent yourself and come back with a vengeance, especially if you were someone that fell into that need of, oh, I'm just going to go with things. I'm not going to cause a ruckus. I'm going to be, the calm, quiet person on the board. And instead, really being a disruptor, but in a good way. So we'll hear from her. And then I've got two other folks coming on. Julius, who is one of my, again, peer mentors. We were in the 40 under 40 class in Pittsburgh together back in, I think, 2017. And he is an incredible advocate for Black mental health in the Pittsburgh area and beyond. And I have learned so much from him over the years, from he being one of the first people that talked about toxicity in the workplace and when you know you need to leave. And I often tapped back into that over the last few years when I was making my decision of, do I shift? And now he and I have really got into conversations about the nonprofit world. And what does it mean in any industry where you are community-based about being authentic? So authenticity is a radical act because sometimes authenticity is not popular. And yet, integrity is so important, and it's a one stable thing that will always outlast everything else. And Natasha is going to come on. She is just a funny person that you would never expect, probably, that her day-to-day career is in construction, and she has a lot of thoughts about what it's like to be a female in a male-dominated industry. She's also a mom, so again, if you see some commonalities coming through here, and just talking about, and I'm going to say it, the DEI of life, and what does it really mean, especially to those who are living some of the components that were meant for that initiative to really influence over time. I've got some others coming on, my friend Brittany, but Brittany's going to be having a baby. So we are also moving things around based on what's happening in folks' lives. So I hope as you listen to some of that, you're like, I'm going to pay attention for that episode that might come up. Like I said, we've got the 2 kind of right off the bat as soon as I come back from this trip that we'll get out to you. But then all of those other ones are yet to come. Now, things I've learned about podcasting. One of them, my mic wasn't plugged in. It didn't work. I had to do all kind of editing to even make it sound like you could hear me. I have learned that doing virtual episodes is a lot easier than the in-person ones that I had been doing. I learned that I needed to get consistent with what people would expect when they see it so that they know, oh, there's a new episode out. I have learned about all of the different podcasting platforms, and I still really don't know anything about them, to be honest. And learning from other people about how much there is on the technical back end of this. And it's not just talking into a microphone. It's not just having a soundproof room. It is so much more planning and engagement and conversation and teasers and social media and all of those pieces. So I know that everything in these first 9 episodes has looked a little bit different. However, I hope what you've picked up on is the fact that I love to hear people introduce themselves. I want them to tell me why it's important to be a part of this conversation. That I know we talk about really tough topics in a lot of these, so taking that deep breath, a moment to just calm and reset and digest everything that's been going on and that's been discussed, and to be able to reflect back on it. And also to know that goofs happen, mistakes happen. And sometimes we're going to swear, sometimes we're going to stutter, sometimes there's going to be awkward pauses. But that's life. And I don't want this to come off as something that is so perfect that it's hard to identify with. So as I come to you today, if you're watching the video, I'm here, no makeup basically, in my Kitten Biscuits hoodie for fall. And I want to present myself as who Natalie is. And make sure that every time you dial into this podcast, you get Natalie in whatever sense she is that day. That you get me as the person who wants to engage and continue these discussions with people who are, in many cases, brighter, more knowledgeable, more passionate about these topics than I could ever imagine. And that's the best that I can do. And I'm excited about it. So I'm asking you as listeners, if you've made it this far into this quick episode recap and kind of teaser going forward, what can I do better? What can I do more of? What do you want to see more of? What do you wish that I would just throw out the door? Because now is the time to do it. This is the time to reset and recreate and really understand what tomorrow looks like. And to be honest, it needs to be something that can pivot. If I get a full-time job again and have to go back into that workforce and I don't have as much time to dedicate to this, because I don't want this to fall apart. I don't want it to go away. It has created already this nice little core village of people who engage and discuss and are coming together, and I want to continue it and I want to be here for it. So if you are one of the people that has part of the about 155 Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon streams, or the folks that have been looking on YouTube, I think there's about a whopping 20 subscribers. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for at least giving it a shot, listening, and considering that it's a growing process. There's a lot to learn. It's not magic. It doesn't just create itself. And I hope you keep coming back. I hope you at least look at what the description of each episode is and think that's going to be worth my time today. Or if none of them are, tell me what you want to hear instead. I'm here to really create something, again, that's a safe place for tough conversations with people who are inspired, motivated, and passionate about the topic that we're discussing. So, with that, I've talked really fast. Hopefully, this has been just a quick kind of reminder about what you can hear if you go back and you listen to anything previously, what you're going to want to listen to in the future. And I'm going to encourage everyone, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, unless you are driving your car, take a deep breath. And give yourself a little grace. And know that every hot mess eventually leads to high potential in some form or fashion. I'll talk to you soon. Can't wait for what's to come.